I was flying for Jimmy Doolittle, and Arnold sent a message to General Doolittle that he wanted the most experienced field grade officer to come back to the United States and get on a B-29 airplane. And Doolittle called me into his office. He said, I don't know anything about this B-29, but he said, they want you, and you're the most experienced man we got at the moment, as far as...
Were you familiar with the fact that there even was a B-29?
No, I never knew it. I never knew it.
Really? So it was it's still basically top secret?
Yeah, they didn't do a lot of publicity on that airplane at that particular time. I think when Eddie Allen got killed, it opened up the box.
Yeah, and he was the test pilot for Boeing.
He was also the project engineer. He was not only the test pilot, he was the engineer. And when they lost that airplane, they lost all of their B-29 experience.
Right, and what was the cause of that accident?
He had an engine on fire, and he tried to make it back into Boeing Field and crashed about a quarter of a mile from the end of the runway into a meat packing plant. Yeah. That was the thing that caused me to go back. When I got back there, my orders said Wichita, Kansas. Well, they stopped me before I got to Wichita because Boeing had said they were not going to build the B-29 airplane. It was too much trouble, there were too many things wrong with it, and all of those sorts of things.
Really?
The argument was, well, we just don't want to build it because we got all these problems. Military, the government said to them, look, we've already given you $50 million. You want to give it back to us? We'll give it to some other manufacturer for an airplane. And on the basis of that, the government said, you will build the B-29. Boeing says, fine, we will run the factory, but we will take no responsibility. Hap Arnold said, we will take the responsibility. You build the damn airplanes. That's what we want.
The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress 9 July 1918, takes pleasure in presenting the Distinguished Service Cross to Colonel Paul Warfield Tibbets, Jr., United States Army Air Forces, for extraordinary heroism in connection with military operations against an armed enemy while serving as pilot of a B-29 very heavy bomber in the 393rd Bombardment Squadron 509th Composite Group, 20th Air Force, while participating in a bombing mission on 6 August 1945 over Japan. On this date, Colonel Tibbets flew a B-29 type aircraft in a daring daylight strike against the city of Hiroshima on the main island of Honshu, Japan, from a base in the Marianas Islands, carrying for the first time a type of bomb totally new to modern warfare. Flying the 1,500 miles of open water to the coast of Japan, he guided his plane over the island of Shikoku and the inland sea, threatened with the constant danger of anti-aircraft. He successfully dropped his bomb upon reaching the target city, this single attack being the culmination of many months of tireless effort, training, and organization unique in the Army Air Force's history, during which he constantly coped with new problems in precision bombing and engineering. The result of this attack was tremendous damage to the city of Hiroshima, contributing materially to the effectiveness of our strikes against the enemy. By extraordinary flying skill, gallant leadership, and successful performance of the flight despite considerable danger, Colonel Tibbets thereby rendered outstanding, distinguished, and valorous service to our nation. It's Thursday, the 7th of August. This is Curmudgeon's Corner. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where our enemies can expect a rain of ruin from the air, the likes of which has never been seen on this earth if they don't come to their senses and surrender immediately. Good afternoon, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to Curmudgeon's Corner. Let's talk about what heroism looks like. Our nation produced no shortage of heroes. In the period between 7 December 1941 and 9 August 1945, it would require a separate video of many hours in length just to read out all their names. But no man in that whole war, out of the 16 million Americans who served in uniform, ever received a more important, more difficult assignment than Colonel Paul Warfield Tibbets, Jr. of Hialeah, Florida, by way of Des Moines, Iowa, by way of Quincy, Illinois. But he's Captain Paul Tibbets when he receives arguably the most consequential assignment in the history of human conflict. He's a young man who has just barely passed his 30th birthday. He's already in the Army at the time of the Pearl Harbor attack. He begins the war flying anti-U-boat patrols over the Atlantic, and then in February of 1942, he is named commanding officer of the 340th Bombardment Squadron, 97th Bombardment Group, 8th Air Force, flying the brand new B-17 Flying Fortress. On 17 August 1942, as Deputy Group Commander, he is the co-pilot of the lead aircraft on the very first daylight heavy bombing raid over German-occupied Europe. And he is again in the lead aircraft for the first 100-bomber B-17 mission on 9 October of that same year, prior to the Allied invasion of French North Africa in Operation Torch in early November, in which American ground troops were to make their first entry into the war. Captain Tibbets is chosen to personally fly Generals Dwight Eisenhower and Mark Clark into Gibraltar for the establishment of their command post. After completing his tour of 25 combat missions, which was an auspiciously improbable achievement by itself, he's transferred to the 12th Air Force, where he becomes assistant for bomber operations and gets to fly a nice comfy desk for a couple of months. He is ordered back stateside in February of 43 to the Boeing plant in Wichita, Kansas, to assist in the development of the new next-generation strategic bomber, the Boeing B-29 Superfortress. He remains in that post for over a year until March of 44, when he is assigned as Director of Operations for the 17th Bombardment Operational Training Wing at Grand Island Army Airfield, Nebraska, where he is tasked with taking B-17 and B-24 pilots and teaching them how to fly the new B-29s. But a lot of these guys, they didn't like the B-29 very much. They found it unwieldy and complicated and altogether more difficult to fly than the B-17s and 24s they were accustomed to, and they really bitched and moaned about it. But Captain Tibbets, he came up with a very effective remedy for their bitching and moaning. He went and got a couple of WASPs, the Women's Air Force Service pilots, named Dora Doherty and Dee Dee Johnson-Mormon. He trained them up on the B-29, and he named the two of them as the official demonstration pilots. After that, the bitching and moaning from the male pilots seemed to quiet right down just as quickly as he expected it would. Because sometimes a little bit of humiliation sure goes a long way. Captain Tibbets remains at Grand Island until the 1st of September 1944, when he is ordered to report to Colorado Springs Army Airfield, headquarters of the 2nd Air Force, where the commander, General Uzel Ent, that is his real name, along with 3 representatives of the Manhattan Project, gave him his first briefing on the existence of the atomic bomb. They don't give him all the details, obviously. We gotta keep all this shit compartmentalized. But here's what they do tell him. We are working on a big motherfucker of a bomb, and if it works as intended, we think it's got the potential to end the war in one fell swoop. We think we can get it small enough to just barely fit into the bomb bay of a modified B-29, and we want you, Captain Paul Tibbets, to be the man who drops it. But you're not going to be Captain Paul Tibbets anymore. We are advancing you all the way up to Bird Colonel. You get to skip both of the oak leaves. We are placing you in command of a new, fully self-contained unit, which we are calling the 509th Composite Group. We're placing 1,800 men and 15 B-29s under your command. You will have automatic priority over any other unit for any stores and equipment you should require. We've got 3 bases available for you to do your work. You can choose whichever one you like the best. You can have Great Bend Army Airfield in Kansas. You can have Mountain Home Army Airfield in Idaho. Or you can have Wendover Army Airfield in Utah. After reviewing his options, Colonel Tibbets selects Wendover because it's more remote and more secluded than the other 2 are. And he doesn't just make that choice based on operational security. He does it also because the remoteness and the seclusion mean that the men he selects will be permitted to bring their wives and families along with them, which he feels will have a positive effect on morale and will enable him to attract the highest quality candidates for the job. And he winds up being correct on both points. Colonel Tibbets, along with his wife, Mrs. Lucy Wingate Tibbets, and their 2 young sons, report for duty at Wendover in January of 1945. But the exigencies of operational security meant that certain information had to be withheld even from spouses. So the Manhattan Project engineers and technicians who were on site had to be euphemistically referred to as sanitary workers, or plumbers, if you like. And I guess you can insert your Watergate joke right here. The point being, one day when Paul was off at work, there was a clogged drain at the Tibbets house. So Lucy, in a perfectly reasonable act based on what she was allowed to know at the time, she went and grabbed one of the people she thought was a plumber, and that nuclear physicist went and dutifully cleared that drain clog with a happy smile on his face, and nobody was ever the wiser. And that must have made for a hell of a fun conversation after the war was over, don't you think? At one point in February, Dr. Robert Oppenheimer himself pays a visit to Wendover to check on the progress of his people. He's in disguise as a plumber with a false identity, naturally, and during a private meeting with Colonel Tibbets, he says, "Look, I'm not authorized to tell you this, but I think you've got the right to know. When you drop this gadget, irrespective of the evasive maneuvers you take, I can't guarantee that you and your aircraft and everybody on board won't be destroyed by the blast wave. We haven't even tested this thing yet. All we have for right now is some theoretical equations on a blackboard. And Tibbets is like, all right, yeah, thanks, Doc. But I kind of already put 2 and 2 together on that score. When I took this assignment, I knew there was probably a significantly non-zero chance that I would perish in the attempt of carrying out this mission. I get that you're a pansy-ass scientist and you want a clear conscience and all that, but I am a military man and I know getting killed is sometimes a part of the job. The 509th Composite Group doesn't reach its full numerical strength until May of 45, just as the war in Europe is ending, because Colonel Tibbets has imposed such a rigorous selection process that something like 80% of the candidates wind up getting rejected. But they wind up with a final complement of 225 officers and 1,542 enlisted men, and by this point in the war, the U.S. Marines have conquered a sufficient number of islands in the Pacific that we are now within B-29 striking range of the Japanese mainland. The island of Tinian is chosen as the base of operations for the 509th. The Seabees get to work building an airfield, the personnel start filtering in, and meanwhile, Project Alberta is also underway, which involves the transportation of the actual bomb and its components, along with the required Manhattan Project personnel to Tinian, and the most famous part of that operation is, of course, the USS Indianapolis tragedy, which takes place as she is attempting to return stateside after delivering the uranium core for the Hiroshima device. All personnel and equipment are in place by 5 August, and that is the day that Colonel Tibbets selects the B-29 to be used for the mission, tail number 4486292, and he christens it Enola Gay in honor of his mother. At 02:45 the next morning, 6 August local time, 7 August U.S. time, which is why we mark the anniversary today and not yesterday, Enola Gay begins her takeoff roll, but she is not alone. She is accompanied by 5 other B-29s that morning. The Great Artiste, which is an observation and instrument plane. He's got scientific observers on board from Project Alberta. Necessary Evil is the camera plane to record the evidence of the event. Straight Flush, Full House, and Jabbit 3. These B-29s serve as weather reconnaissance craft. They are tasked with checking conditions over Hiroshima and the 2 alternate targets of Kokura and Nagasaki. 2 of those aircraft, Great Artiste and Necessary Evil, they took off from Iwo Jima and rendezvoused with the others when they were already en route. And you know the rest of the story. The weather was fine over the primary target, and aside from a bit of momentary difficulty that was encountered in removing the safety plugs from the device, the operation came off pretty much without a hitch. The bombardier hits an absolute bullseye. Tibbets pulls the most eye-popping right-hand dive that's probably ever been attempted in an aircraft of that size in order to get clear of the blast wave. And I like to think afterward that he pumped his fist and said, "Fuck you, Oppenheimer." And after the war ended, after one more atomic bomb drop a few days later, without the need for a U.S. invasion and the horrific effusion of blood that would have accompanied it. Now, when I was a kid, you used to see Colonel Paul Tibbets, who by that time had retired as Brigadier General Paul Tibbets. You used to see him on TV every year at this time, but as the 1970s turned into the 1980s, the character of those interviews changed rather markedly. Whereas before it was just the reporter asking Tibbets for his recollections of the day, as it ought to have been. Eventually, it became all about feelings and emotions and recriminations. The network morning shows would go into Paul Tibbets' living room. The interviewer would always be a female by this point, a Katie Couric or a Connie Chung or a Barbara Walters or a Leslie Stahl or what have you. And the object of the interview became about trying to make Tibbets express some sort of remorse or contrition, which to his credit, he never did. My country gave me a job to do. I tried to do it to the best of my ability, and I am proud of the fact that hundreds of thousands of Americans are alive today who wouldn't be if we had had to invade Japan, which of course is the correct answer. But at the same time, we should all be ashamed of ourselves that we allowed a bona fide American hero in his golden years to be treated so shabbily by our proto-fake news media. And why is that? Because in his final years, General Paul Tibbets informed his family that he didn't want to have a funeral or a gravesite, because he knew if he did, it would just become an object of protest or vandalism. And so, when this great man passed away on the 1st of November 2007 at the age of 92, according to his wishes, he was cremated and his ashes scattered over the English Channel, the same body of water in which so many of his friends and colleagues had perished 65 years earlier. Paul Tibbets ought to have had a funeral in Arlington National Cemetery, a funeral that befitted his status as one of the greatest heroes in humanity's most horrific war. And he didn't get that. And that sucks. And it may be too late to bury him at Arlington, but it is damn well not too late to give him a monument there. And so, today, I will write to my congressman, and I will write to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, as I encourage you to do as well. And I will state my firm belief that General Paul Tibbets deserves the honor of his own monument in Arlington National Cemetery, so that he can stand where he rightfully belongs, in the pantheon of America's greatest war heroes. And if any little asshole douchebag son of a bitch tries to vandalize that monument, they can deal with me directly. I'm done. That's all I've got. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Get off my lawn.